about is like the timing of the market, because I hear a lot of people saying like, oh, I'm going to wait until, I'm going to wait and kind of like observe the market, right? And until maybe like fall of next year, and then we'll see what happens. So in terms of timing the market, like what is your advice? What is your thinking around that? What would you tell your clients? Because I'm reading and hearing a lot of that.
Yeah, I get that question all the time, and my answer is always the same. Best time to buy is when it's the best time for you. When you're financially ready and prepared, the right home will pop. However, there is an opportunity cost of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So, just kind of based off national stats, I did this number last week, and in Denver, the average close price was 660 at the end of November. If we look at 2% appreciation, 3% appreciation, and then 3%, and then 4%, by the end of 2027, that $660,000 home is going to be worth $750,000.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at a 90-some thousand dollar appreciation, and that's what I mean for the cost of waiting. But no matter how much I can like scream and yell, like, please buy, get off the sidelines, like,
Right.
that's not going to force anyone to do it. Like I can only advise and they have to own their decisions. I think a lot of people are more motivated to buy when they see the consensus buying around them. So I just believe that people are afraid or fearful to buy when other people aren't. But once they see everyone else buying, they think it's okay and they're willing to compete as a result of it. I was talking to one of my colleagues, and she has a buyer who's been searching. Her buyer actually wrote an offer on one of my listings back in August, and it was a really nice house. And the buyer wrote the offer at $30,000 below asking price on the first weekend, and we had multiple offers at or above asking price. And that buyer just didn't want to compete or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
That home was listed for $550. Now, this same buyer, she's wrote a couple other offers, haven't won it. And now she's finally getting serious. And the offer that she wrote this past weekend was for $535, but she had to escalate it $30,000 over asking price. And she had to compete and waive everything, and she still didn't win. So, like in hindsight, she could have won this home for maybe $5,000 over asking, got an inspection, all of that. But she wasn't necessarily ready, and that's okay. Like as agents, sometimes we have to let our clients learn the lesson themselves. Like we have to show, don't tell is kind of a big thing for me. And we can't force it. And that can be frustrating for us because we know what's good for our clients, but we're not the decision makers here. And we can only just continue to show them and educate them and let them make the decision that they feel most comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay. So I totally get that. And you said something that's really important, because as a marketer, like I'm always talking about culture, because truly culture is the number one like motivator for human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And like people don't buy based on even homes, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're saying it right here. People don't buy based on like rational. They buy based on emotion, and then they justify later.
Mm-hmm.
And also people look around and they go, what are people like me? It's like a tribe thing, right? It's
Yeah.
biology. What are people like me doing? That's why I talk in terms of, like when you saw my LinkedIn, team new, hashtag team new versus team resale, because it truly is a mindset based on like culture. People
Mm-hmm.
look around. That's why I scour Reddit. People look around and go, what are we all doing here?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Are we pulling the trigger or are we not? Are we waiting and are we all stepping back and observing? And so that's why, to your point, I say the takeaway when you hear people say, no, 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 like keep renting, is not to try to force those people to make a decision into buying, because you're going to spend a lot of money and time doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's to focus on the people who really want to buy
Yeah.
and make it happen for them and resonate with them, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't force her based on all the rationale and all of your advice and your expertise. Like you can't force her to buy if she's not ready, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think there's a couple things in that. So 2023 was a really great market to identify that, right? And what I mean by that is I was showing homes to people who said they wanted to buy, but I was spinning all of my wheels, wasting my weekends for people who were never going to write offers. And
Yeah.
I want to help them, but I can't just talk to them blue in the face to encourage them. Like if they're not going to make the decision, that's okay. Like I have enough business that I don't need to pressure them or anything like that.
Right.
So I had to make a conscious decision between need and want, and I had to go after the need to buy buyers, and that's why
Mhm.
I had a successful year last year. But the want to buy, like I don't want to dismiss them. They're all starting to pop their heads up right now. You know, as the rates get better, they're seeing more activity in the market. They're seeing homes that they like at the market. So they are starting to, you know, raise their hand again. But if I had just spent time on them in the past 9 months, I would have wasted so much time, money, and effort.
Right.
The other thing is, like, from a personal perspective, I was 22 when I bought my first home, and I bought it in San Diego,
Mhm.
and I closed on December 31st, 2008. So in the height of, you know, the market crashing around me, I decided to buy. And I look back on that experience quite a bit right now because social media was a thing, but it wasn't as big. Like, you know, media was not influenced by social media trends or anything like that, or
Totally.
catchy headlines or that type of thing. And I just bought because it was something I had been brought up, told to do. My dad really believed in real estate. And I just remember being as a kid, telling me, buy real estate as soon as you can, buy as you can, soon, early, young. So that's what I did when I had my first job. And I didn't, I don't really remember the economic turmoil around me, right? Which is the craziest thing about it. Like I
Yeah.
felt comfortable and confident about my job. And so I decided to move forward and buy. I bought something that was in my budget and I didn't overspend. The interest rate was 5%, so it was great back then. You know, it'd be great
Yeah.
today. So
Mhm.
it was just a very different culture. And funny thing about it, I found my property on Craigslist. It was a condo
Ooh,
conversion.
nice.
So I just worry that there's too much noise
Noise.
out there
Totally.
for consumers to sort through. And that's one of the things that in my buyer consultation, I explain the market to them. Like I explain, this is from a macro level, what to expect from a micro level. In the Denver area, this is what it's like. And then this is what you can experience in a transaction. It's important for you to understand that, but you have to recognize that this is noise and we need to focus on exactly what you want. Let me deal with the noise and advise you on the strategy that we have to approach for your buying, from a buying perspective. So I think
Yeah.
once I tell them to just like put that aside, address it, understand it, and move on, then they know what to expect through the buying process and they're ready to make the difficult decisions. But this whole fear and misinformation, it's challenging for me in my job too. And that's one of the reasons why I started posting on LinkedIn a year ago, was because these headlines and the fear
Yeah.
from the housing recession, like it was having some real big real world impact with my clients who miss out on opportunities to get into the market as a result of misinformation that they were reading. So that is why like I'm trying to become more of a trusted source about what I'm seeing on the grounds, like the advice I'm giving, the wins, the challenges, all of
Right.
that, to like help educate and inform the consumer, because I think it's really difficult for them to find trustworthy information out there.
Yeah. Okay. I totally agree with you. The noise, and that's a really interesting story. How you're 22, you were less influenced because, 2000, I remember 2008. I think I was in my first job. I was probably close to your age, like 22,
Mhm.
23. I wasn't buying a home yet, but it was way less influence. I think that's the main thing. And that's culture, right? Like
Mhm.
there was just so much less social media influence. You couldn't go on 5 different platforms and get everyone's opinion, internalize it, and then make your decision. It's like, ooh, that's not the way to do it anymore. So
Yes.
in terms of, your position as a realtor, marketing and really talking to consumers, I just think what you're doing is most definitely the way to engage with your buyers, right?
Mhm.
And to get them before they raise their hand. Because a lot of times by the time they raise their hand, they think it's the time, but it's not. They should have talked to you 3 months prior.
Mhm.
And same with marketing is like, you know, really talking to the buyers and the consumers ahead of time, right? Like when they're in the awareness stage, being misinformed by all of the headlines and everything. Um,
Yeah, I
so
want to
that's
just
really
comment on
interesting.
this. too, because literally right before we hopped on this call, I got a
Yeah.
message on LinkedIn and it says, "Hey, Lauren, I've been following you for the last year on LinkedIn. I really appreciate your insights. We're thinking about making a move. Can we set up a phone call to chat?" So
Right.
like, this is the education phase, right? And that is what the buyers are doing right now on Reddit. They're asking questions, they're learning, they're trying to find a source of information. I haven't talked
Right.
to this guy in a decade, right? And then all of a sudden he messages me, he's been following me, all the things that I'm saying on there. Like, so it has value. And I think that's what
Yeah.
we have to understand is that what we're communicating, it's not instant. We're too much instant gratification right now. We just have to do what's right. We have to educate and inform, and you're going to get an audience as a result of that. They may not be, I don't even think he's liked one of my posts, like I haven't
Right.
seen him anywhere. But he has obviously been reading what I've been saying. He's been digesting it, thinking about it. So just, you have to be consistent in your communication efforts too. I like a lot of what 1000 Watt is doing right now with their marketing and communication. And what they're saying is 2024 is the year of marketing and strategic communication. So agents, companies that understand that, I think are going to be the ones that win in this new market.
Yeah. From my perspective, it's brand building. We're saying the same thing, but it's really brand building. And a lot of people look at brand building as long term, like I need short term revenue, leads, conversions, but that doesn't always pan out, right? Like the brand building is so important because it's all about trust. And especially when it comes to buying a home, buying and selling
Mhm.
homes. Um,
Yep.
that trust is, again, what I hear a lot on Reddit is the lack of trust or the perceived lack of trust, or they're just concerned. And a lot of that's just a cultural thing, right? People are less they're more
Yeah.
skeptical, right, of larger corporations, of people they don't know, of, right, I mean, that's just how it's been lately, and I think that's a big shift in culture, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a division, obviously, in beliefs. You can't have thoughtful, engaged conversations these days and learn from different sides without potentially causing more controversy. So it can be, there's different camps that people stay in, and it's the mixing of the camps isn't necessarily happening, and that's not good for anybody. Um, I do think that it's big about brand too. Like you just have to develop that trust, that insight and experience. But the industry in of itself, like we're not doing ourselves any favors. Like, I don't really post on Facebook or Instagram. Like, I'm not going to go around dance on that. Just stuff is like, what are we, right? What are we as
Right.
an industry? And the fact that there's this mistrust out there, like it doesn't surprise me when people are seeing, million dollar listing and all those and just the money being flashed around. Like, is that what this industry is about? Like, that's what the consumer's perspective is. But the reality is like, I think it's one of the most important professions that are out there. It's just not being taken seriously. Like real estate is social mobility, and anyone can get into it and they can change the course of their life. And they need that advisor there that is helping them, guide them, not only before the transaction, during the transaction, and beyond. And I think we've lost sight of that in the transactional, commission focused communications that are going out.
Okay, that's super interesting. Like I really like that. It really is one of the biggest, most important purchases you're going to make. And so I just lost my train of
I
thought.
have a question though. Like, this is my
Yeah.
question for consumers is like, why aren't they taking it more seriously? Like, that's what I don't have the answer. Like, why are they hiring the first agent that they meet, not doing enough due diligence, and just trusting that person? That's where I don't necessarily have the answer. My guess is that real estate is slowly being commoditized, and the importance of the transaction and the nuances of the transaction aren't being communicated, and the value that a real agent, a professional agent delivers isn't being elevated. I think when you look, because as a result of tech, right? A lot of the news headlines right now are, my agent just opened the door. They didn't do anything for me. I am in the transaction right now where I have sent 600 text messages. I have made 50 plus phone calls just with my clients, not with any of the vendors. I've sent nearly 300 emails. Like, there's a lot more that goes into real estate than just opening the door. In fact, opening the door is a very small piece of what I do. And I think we're not communicating the additional steps that go into buying and selling real estate. Like this deal, just one of them is probably going to take 40 to 50 hours, right? It's like that over
Mhm.
the course of 3, 4 months, but it's way more involved than, and we're making it look too easy as a result. And consumers aren't valuing the service we offer. And there's too many of us, and there's no standards, or standards aren't being enforced, and people aren't being held accountable.
Why do you think there's too many reels? Because when you said, oh, I'm not going to go on social media, all the social medias, and like, people are posting about these like $1 million listings or more, right? Why do you think it does seem like there's a lot of real estate agents in the world? And again, this is what my husband reminds me. Social media amplifies everything, right? So
Mhm.
it's like there was this many real estate agents before, we just didn't see them all because we didn't have social media. Do you think
Yeah.
that's the case, or do you think more people are getting into real estate?
Oh, no,
That's
I mean, I
happening.
think you can look back into the data and see that there's been a steady growth of agents. We have, I think the new numbers are out from NAR, and there's like 1.55 million licensed real estate agents. I was hoping that number would be a lot lower, but there
Yeah.
was a new study from the Consumer Federation of America that looked, I think, at 5 different geographic areas, and they sampled agents at big brokerages and boutique within each area. And what they found was 49% of agents had sold 0 to 1 homes in the past year, and nearly 70% of agents had sold less than 5 homes in the past year. So over 1 million licensed agents are part-time agents. Like that's crazy. So it's hard. I empathize with the consumer. Like, how do you differentiate an agent? Like, how do you know who's going to be good for you? Because you have so much amateurs out there. Like
Right.
it's harder for the top agents to really kind of rise to the top because there's, again, so much noise.
Well, I think it was important that because you said, because five to me would be like, is that enough? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm in the home building industry, so like, but new home. So is five enough to like really trust that person? To me, that doesn't seem like a lot. But I think a lot of people might go, oh, well, the market has been really crappy. So we haven't sold as much. I think when it comes to real estate, people focus a lot on all the external factors,
Mhm.
like, and so maybe there's less onus on the real estate agent in the consumer's mind. That's an
Yeah,
assumption.
but I also feel like consumers, again, don't necessarily value the process, right? How many of them are working with Aunt Sally because she's Aunt Sally,
Sure.
and like, and feels an personal obligation to work with Aunt Sally? Like, is Aunt Sally going to know that this past weekend there were, multiple offers in the market, right? Because
Right.
maybe Aunt Sally was sitting at home with her family, not showing buyers. Like those are, sorry, Aunt Sally, but like that's kind of what we have to be looking at. Is like,
Yeah.
I tell my clients the market literally changes every week right now. And, rates go up, down, left, right, inventory comes up, it goes down. And you have to be able to respond to those dynamics. And if you are not in the market, then you're not sensing the change. One of the things that I've learned just over the past year of just writing on LinkedIn was like, I am actually in tune and in pulse with the market. Like I can feel it changing before the data even comes out. Like I know what consumer sentiment is going to be like based off the number of phone calls I'm getting. It's like
Yeah.
that in of itself is just kind of the intangible pulse that I feel that I can help keep my clients ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, on the cutting edge of the market changing too.
Okay, so that's one thing too, just because that's what I'm really focused on is like consumer sentiment. Is like you had originally said, they feel in control right now. So that is most of them are coming to you excited, feeling in control. Um, what else are you hearing from people? Just in general, since you're close to, and doesn't have to be necessarily around sentiment. It could be, what are they
Yeah.
worried about? What are they excited about? What are their major life changes that are happening? Do you know what I mean? Like the mom who's separating from her
Yeah.
husband, like what are some of those things that you're hearing?
I mean, I think there's just pent up demand, right? And I think we're starting to see the pent up demand burst. Like people can only live in their homes for so long, that don't fit when they have a growing family. Like
Yeah.
that is a pain in of itself. Like Pregnant women. If you want to find now buyers, you find pregnant women.
Yeah.
They they need to get into that home and they need to start nesting, and prepare it for
Yep.
the baby. Like, so there are always going to be those types of buyers. I think a lot of people have been making concessions and they're finally coming to terms with what interest rates are and what they're going to be for the foreseeable future. And so they're adjusting budgets. This whole unemployment issue, right? Like they're supposed to be an unemployment recession. I don't think that's necessarily come to fruition just yet. So people are feeling confident in their jobs. What I am personally concerned about and watching is taxes, and just especially here in the Denver and Colorado in general, we've seen a huge jump in taxes based off some changes in our laws and regulation. So I'm worried about people's ability to continue to afford their home, even if they have a low interest rate. Can they continue to pay the taxes on it? And then insurance. Insurance is going up significantly in many states too. So my personal insurance, I think I'm spending an additional like $3,000 a year just on one of my primary residents. So that's an additional $300, $400 a month just between taxes and insurance going up. Like, I was prepared for it, and I'm communicating it to my clients, but not everyone, even if they are prepared for it, they may not be able to pay for it too. So that is where I know we don't have a lot of listings, but I think listings are going to be shaken free over, in the foreseeable future as a result of people just having to move, life just forcing it, and then the cost of living in certain areas is no longer sustainable.
Okay, so you do think that listings are going to be shaken free? Because I read something, and we all know we don't necessarily need to take all the news seriously. But that like 2024, the mortgage rates they're probably going to stay around the same. And so the people with the 3% or 4% mortgage rates aren't going to move. So new homes are going to be kind of the golden child, because people are going to still have to be moving, but there's still not going to be, the mortgage rates aren't going to be low enough for sellers to actually want to sell their homes if they're in a lower mortgage rate.
I think
Does any of that?
I think a rate in the 6 is close enough to a rate in the 3 and the 4 for people to start making the move. Like,
So for sellers to sell and for there to be more inventory.
I think we're going to see it. I was surprised at how many nice new listings hit the market the first week of January here in Denver.
Okay.
I was surprised at how many homes I've been watching. One home that expired last year that was really difficult to sell. It was on the market through the holidays. Got an offer this past week, and it was a 7-figure listing. And so I just think that the demand is going to be there, right? Once sellers start seeing homes are moving faster, they're going to put their homes on the market.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I want to be cognizant of time. We have 9 minutes. I want to ask you like, I like if you had to narrow it down, what was the number one reason your recent clients decided to buy? And then if you had to convince a client to buy rather than rent, and you only had 2 minutes to explain, like, what would you say?
Let me, I want to collect a stat on that one because I meant to look it up before.
Okay.
But here, hold on one second. Okay. So why my recent buyers starting to buy? Life changes. Pregnancy, outgrowing the home, have a young baby, no longer can make that small house work. More people want to continue to have more babies. Like, that's another thing. I know that we're not having enough kids in America and just in the world in general.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if it's delayed too, because I've had 6 new babies enter the world in my business in the past year. So, and they're all older millennials that were having the babies too. And then marriage, right? So one of my recent buyers, they were just getting married. So they were engaged, ready to get the house. I think that's a big thing to pay attention to. Houses before spouses. And people are buying homes. A lot of my first time buyers that are couples aren't married when they're buying. So that is just something I'm seeing a lot of. Yeah, and I think it's just waiting, finally feeling ready to buy, is they've saved enough money.
What about multi-generational like that's been a kind of a big thing lately is people are, it's not just like this nuclear family. They're living with grandparents or they're living with, do you see anything like that in your market?
We don't really have tons of generational living here in the Denver area, so I think that that's part of the challenge.
Mhm.
What I do, there's a lot of people moving to Colorado from out of state. And what I do see happen is that the kids move to Colorado and then the parents follow because there's grandkids. So they don't want to be making a commute. They want to be around their family. So a lot of baby boomers are moving to Colorado to be near their family too. This is where their kids have decided to settle. One thing I think is actually important is how are these buyers paying for homes? Because with these higher interest rates, it's difficult. And I would say a majority of my clients get gifts to be able to buy their home. Parents are flush with cash because they've owned their real estate and they can give some money to their kids to get started. I do worry. Like I have concerns about affordability in the long term. I have serious concerns about first-time home buyers. And one of the biggest things that is a little bit of a frustration with mine, that I try really hard with my clients is shift expectations. Like I read these articles and people are complaining, I couldn't get a single family home because I couldn't afford it or I couldn't compete. So I'm just going to continue renting. Like that is, I think, the worst decision that you could be making. And I know we talked about it with that first time home buyer in their 40s buying that like mansion, you know?
Totally. Yes.
Yeah, I just
Yes.
feel like you have to shift your perspective with where things are today, right?
Yeah.
If prices were a little bit better, then maybe you could jump from an apartment to a single family home. But I tell my clients it's a ladder. You have to take one step at a time. And as long as you're in the market, you can get up the market. If you don't
Mhm.
get in the market, your ability to get into the market in the future is going to be way more challenging. So we have to take like a stair step approach, buy what you can today so you can buy what you want tomorrow. And that is a real big mental shift that I think a lot of people struggle with. And those who really want to become a homeowner will make sacrifices. Those who are unable to see themselves in anything but their dream home are going to continue renting. And
Yeah.
I think that's bad advice just in general too, because you learn so much with the first home that you buy, the second home you buy, that really informs what you want for your dream home.
Mhm.
And so getting those starter homes, whether it's a starter condo, townhome, or a small single family, that is what sets you on a path to get to your forever home, to that dream home, because you know what you want and you're making way more of an informed decision.
Well, I wonder, and I know every market is different, but a lot of you hear a lot about like the third places and more communal spaces beyond the home. Do people actually need to be living in these like 3,000 square foot houses? Um, you know, but I personally, like I literally, and I think I told you this before, maybe it was on LinkedIn, but like my husband and I waited because we had to have our certain things. And then
Mhm.
we realized we're not going to get all these things because we can't afford it. It's just too, too much. So then we brought our expectations down and down and down, which was, it sucks, but it's realistic, right?
Mhm.
Um, but and also I feel like we filled our house. We bought a certain size house and then you just fill it because you have to fill it. But maybe we don't need all of that. I think there comes a point where there's more, I love the parks down the street and the school and the restaurants and like that, some of the walkability.
Mhm.
There are more you might not need like this huge house. They're holding out for this huge house and it's like maybe you don't really need that. But
Yeah.
again, that I always say that's a culture thing. Like that's an American society, the American dream. Like it's a status thing. Like there's a lot of like rooted beliefs that are like instilled in us that are hard to get past.
Yeah. So
You
two
know what I
things
mean?
there. Yeah. So when I was in San Diego and driving in California, I was obviously looking at the homes, seeing the for sale sign, checking out what their cost, and I know exactly what that home looks like on the inside because we had the same style home in Denver on the inside. But when I would go and look at these prices, I'd be like, oh, for that, like,
Right.
and I just wonder, like, how do people, the challenges my buyers have here for the price, like what they can get for their money, like it would be crazy in California. I can't imagine some of my buyers who have families living in the homes that they ended up in being able to pay the same price and get what they get in California. Like the sacrifices would be so huge that I just wonder if it's worth it for them. The other thing is, I think generational perspective is really important. I have a caveat in one of my first emails that I send to my clients is that real estate advice is very common. If you have any questions, please always come to me. I'm happy to give you the ground truth and perspective and research any questions that you may have. The reason I say that is because of the influences, right? And the generational influences from parents
Mm-hmm.
who are also just shocked at the buying experience that their kids have to go through and the competition that they're up against. So a parent who bought a home 30 years ago, that experience is nowhere near what their kid is going through. So when you're talking about culture and influences, I would say there's also familial influences in the decision making. And there's lots of jokes about the buyer's dad coming to an inspection and
Really?
blowing up deals. And it can be very hard because sometimes I'm not only advising the clients, but I'm advising their family too about the realities of the market. And so that is just very challenging for people to grasp the realities of our markets today.
And tech isn't doing that. Right?
No. I mean, every deal is different. So as much as tech is trying to commoditize the industry, like I don't know how you do that. There is that last mile effect in real estate, and that last mile effect is the agent too. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.